College basketball athletes and fans are gearing up and preparing for the greatest month in sports, March Madness. As the regular season comes to a close and conference tournaments are nearly upon us, some teams are just looking to end out their regular season strong, and for others, every game matters. Welcome back to Penn State Sports Night. I'm your host, Kiera Baker, alongside analysts Hannah Valcourt and Julia Henry, where we'll be discussing our thoughts on the hottest and coldest teams and shocker teams entering this upcoming NCAA tournament. So, who do you guys think are the hottest teams going into this NCAA tournament, women's and men's?
So, for the women's side, the hottest team is Virginia Tech. They're up to number 5 now, and they've just really had a dominating season. Last season, they made it to the Final Four, and they've been able to maintain this ranking and have the 2-time ACC Player of the Year with Elizabeth Kitley on their team, and they've just been able to remain dominant since that Final Four, and they look to really secure the ACC conference when they play their last ranked game against number 17 Notre Dame later in this week, and look to continue that into March with their 2 players, Georgia Almore and Kitley, who average about 30 points per game.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with number 2, Ohio State. They've been really dominant this season, especially with J.C. Sheldon coming back. Last season, she only played 13 games, which I think will help them go far in the tournament. They currently have 20 turnovers per game, and they've beaten only 3 teams in the Big Ten. They've allowed 72 or more points. So I really think that they have a strong chance of going to the Final Four and competing for a national championship this year compared to last year.
And on the flip side, what about the men's?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Tennessee. They've had a really strong season in the SEC there, and they've just really been able to remain dominant throughout this season, climbing up to their highest point with their number 4 position here. And their head coach just secured his 800th win, and he's really been able to lead the program.
Yeah, I'm going to go with, there was a little bit of a 3-way controversy with number 1, but I'm going to go with Houston, who just took over for UConn's spot. I feel like with UConn's current loss to Creighton, that really gives Houston so much more of a number 1 emphasis for Houston. I feel like they've done really good this season against teams, and they'll be in the Final Four for sure.
Yes, and I totally agree with both of you guys' NCAA women's and men's team takes, but I'm going to go with number 1, South Carolina. They've been dominant all season. They have a post presence, and they have guard play with Camila Cardozo averaging a double-double this season, as well as they have shooters on the perimeter with Tahina Paopao. She is shooting the 3 over 40% this season, which is the most in NCAA women's tournament. And then with the men, I have to agree with you, Hannah, with Houston. They're just on fire with their leading scorer, LJ Cryer, averaging 15 points per game, and they will make it far in this tournament. Now, let's talk about the coldest teams in the NCAA tournament. Which teams do you think are on a decline going into the tournament?
Yeah, I'm going to have to take for the women's NC State. They've dropped to number 12. They dropped 6 spots, the furthest drop in this week's poll, the last week of the poll of the regular season. And they've just struggled. They previously won 8 out of their last 9 games, and then they just dropped their last 2 games to Duke and UNC, both by more than 10 points. And in their loss to Duke, they scored just 58 points, their fewest points all season, after shooting just 14% in that first quarter. So really, they kind of need to regain that rhythm, and that's what head coach Wes Moore has said about them, too.
Yeah, Julie, I'm going to have to completely agree with you. I feel like NC State, since the beginning of the season, especially with their back-to-back losses, have just been kind of going down off a cliff a little bit, and I really don't think that they'll be competing highly with those other ranked teams in the playoffs.
And what about on the men's side?
Yeah, for the men, Baylor has dropped to number 15 there, and they've just really struggled with getting out-rebound. They had that thriller overtime game against Houston over this past weekend, which some say might be the best game of this college basketball season so far, and gave a very tournament feel to it, as Baylor was able to really almost come back, take that game to overtime after being down. but really they've just struggled recently, and they don't have anyone on their team really who averages. They had a couple guys who average about 20 points per game, but they just need to get more of a team effort, get those bench players more involved, and that's where they've struggled this season.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with Duke. Usually such a strong offensive team in the playoffs, in the seasons, but they just haven't been lately, especially with their current loss to Wake Forest. Huge upset. And they've lost to 4 different ranked teams this season. I just don't think they'll be able to keep competing and go far in the playoffs. They didn't really do good last year in March Madness, so I really don't think that they'll be playing at top level.
Yes, and just to piggyback off what both of you guys said, this NC State team, they are on a decline going into the playoffs. I feel like after losing Alyssa Cunane last year, which was their main player, they've had to pick up the slack. But Sanaya Rivers was a great addition to this team, and she has been stepping it up. And for our last point, who do you guys think are going to be some shockers in this NCAA tournament? Some teams that'll make it past and maybe even get some upsets.
Yeah, for the women, I'm going to go with USC, number 7, and they are led by Juju Watkins, and she's a freshman, and she has just played insane this season. She averages about 28 points per game, and she's carried the Trojans, who just they were ranked 1 week, number 25 last season, and this season they've been ranked every single week, and she's really carried them through, and even looking forward to how her legacy carries through, as she's scored 705 points so far in her freshman season, and you look at greats like Caitlin Clark, who scored 799 her freshman season. So you can almost kind of see that comparison and that excitement that maybe she could even beat that scoring record that was just broken.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you. That's a really good point, but I'm going to have to go with Utah. Such a major underdog. They have four wins against ranked teams, and when they played number 1 South Carolina and at the time number 8 Colorado, they only lost by 11 points. That they kept up the entire game, and when now currently number 4 Stanford, they only lost by 2 points to them. So I feel like when they're in the tournament playing those weaker teams, they'll get to go farther in the tournament because they've played so many of those strong teams already this season and know their game, know how to keep up with them. So I think they'll really go far.
And what about on the men's side?
Yeah, and then for the men, number 18 South Carolina Gamecocks. They've been ranked now for their 3rd straight week, and this is the first time they've been ranked since 2017. And they don't have a single player on their team who averages more than 13 points a game. They have their 2 best players average about 13 a game, and no one higher than that. So that could definitely raise some concerns for a deep run. But they've been really hot, and they're up 2 spots in the poll. And right now they sit at 2nd in the SEC behind Tennessee, who I talked about as the hottest team. So if you look at who's in their conference and who they're playing, they've really been able to have an excellent season and look to have that 2-game bye in the SEC tournament if they can win out the rest of their conference schedule.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with Creighton, who just had an upset loss to UConn. I feel like, especially in past, they have been new to the tournament. Now they have the experience. They're in the Big East. They play those high-ranked teams. I feel like this year is going to be completely different. They're ranked number 15, I believe. So I feel like there's a completely different vibe and atmosphere going into this tournament that I believe will help them get far and possibly be in a national championship spot.
The Lady Vols are my shocker team for the women's side. They have Rakia Jackson, which is averaging 19 points for their team, and she is a top 6 draft pick for the WNBA draft coming up, as well as Tamara Key. She's now played her 6th starting spot just in their last matchup against LSU, and she was coming back from injury, starting on the bench, but now she's made her presence known. And with those 2 additions, as well as Sarah Puckett, bringing up her average from 4 points per game last season to 10 this year, those additions I think will make a great impact for this Tennessee team, and they will be able to shock people. 62 teams will take all and be in action for the NCAA tournament starting March 19th for the men's and March 20th for the women's, all competing for one thing, a national championship. Will the favorites take it home, or will this be the year for the underdogs? We'll just have to stay tuned and be prepared for a month full of thrilling and exciting games. That'll be all for this edition of Penn State Sports Night. For Hannah Valcourt and Julia Henry, I'm Kiera Baker. Thank you for tuning in and have a great night.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning into this edition of Penn State Sports Night.
For more content like this, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, give us a like, and follow our socials down below.
And as always, we are
Penn State Sports Night.